Even when I starting at 21 or whatever, that was still old. That was still impossible. That still couldn't be done. If you ask me, can someone start at 21 now and be a pro? I don't know. But, the underlying message is that regardless of what the number is, if you're going to try something, you're going to be told you can't do it for a variety of reasons. You're too old or it's not going to work. You should try anyway.
Welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast. I'm Matthew Pioro, and joining me is feature writer Jake Williams and new to the pod, James Bunga. Writer James Bunga, welcome both of you.
Thanks for having me. Oh, sorry. I spoke over you. That'll be the first and only time. Good to see you, James. Good to see you, Matthew. How are you doing, James?
Good. Good to see you both as well. Just trying to stay warm amid this frigid temperatures and snowstorm Armageddon in Toronto.
Record-breaking,
yeah.
All right, we've just lost half the country with Toronto weather talk. Thank you, guys. Anyway, in this episode, we have Montrealer James Piccoli, former pro road rider. He has a new book, which is just coming out now. Readers of Canadian Cycling Magazine, subscribers, both digital and in glorious print, will have seen an excerpt from his book. I talked to James about his career and his book and just what goes into being a feisty, you can't tell me I can't do it kind of road racer. We'll hear from James in just a minute. But first, Jake and James Bunga, not James Piccoli, let's talk about the World Cyclocross Championships. That was a pretty exciting event recently. I'm going to start with the course. It was a beautiful looking course, and I think it made for great racing. And I was just trying to think, am I just smitten with the windmill and the well sculpted, like everything else around it? Because I was going back to look at recent World Championships, and some of them just look a little rough. And granted, it's cyclocross, it's muddy, it's sloppy. It looked pretty polished there in Hulst. Jake, what do you think?
Hulst was beautiful. I mean, a first-time venue for World Championships. We did see a World Cup there last year, which I would say was captivating. Now, the course was altered for this year's World Championships to, I think, make it a little bit less technical and adapt to weather. But if you guys remember from last year, one of the run-ups that was used in this year's course was a downhill last year, and it was absolutely chaotic. I urge all listeners to go check out highlights of that race if you haven't seen it, because it's unreal. But it was a beautiful day, and you're right, the windmill was iconic, obviously being in the Netherlands. My favorite part, or one of my favorite parts of every race, on the first lap when they'd come through and they'd shoot the confetti cannons out of orange confetti going, and it's literally getting in riders' faces, and it almost becomes part of a course. So I think riders might have to be preparing for the confetti cannon somewhere late on lap one.
Right. Okay. I think, are we going to have to see confetti cannon drills, practicing your skills through a confetti cannon barrage?
For sure. I mean, we talked off air about snot rockets, but imagine snot rocketing with confetti and maybe things getting in the way or not getting in the way. Like, it could lead to be disastrous. So it's just, again, yet another obstacle. Maybe tire choice comes into the condition of the confetti on the mud, or how slick the confetti is. I mean, who knows? There's plenty to go off of here.
I love how the sport of cyclocross continues to evolve.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to launch with my favorite race. I think the best race of the weekend was the under 23 women's race. Disagree with me. Go ahead.
Ooh, interesting. So, I mean, yeah, I would probably say you're right there. The under 23 men's race was pretty good too. Although special shout out to the women's elite race, where can I just say, some of the camera work, things were missed a little bit. Can we get more than one commentator on the broadcast? It seems like a heavy lift for one person to do, but
it's a lot of talking.
It's a lot of talking, as we know here. But what were your favorite parts of that race that you liked?
Well, I just thought just the way Leonie Brenfeld snuck in lap 4, she snuck past Victoria Chladinova, who was leading for 3 laps, and then you're like, oh, is this a sign? Is this a change in the race? And then Chladinova comes back, and it goes back and forth. But then Brenfeld's move where she took the high line on a descent, that's the same descent where Puck Peterson crashed in the elite women's race. Brenfeld takes the high line, gets a good gap. Granted, Chladinova did close the gap, but then Brenfeld just kept pushing and pushed right to the line, making, in fact, a bigger gap on the second place rider.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, she's been dominant in, her category now for a couple of years. So this was definitely some icing on the cake. At moments she looked in a league of her own, and she was, her elbows were sharp, which I always love to see in cyclocross. She shut the door on a few interesting corners. And yeah, it was very exciting racing. Going into the women's elite race, there was a lot of naysaying about, maybe Brand's not well or not peaking, but that as soon as Puck crashed, we kind of, saw what was coming. And Alvarado, to her credit, put on a really good show. I did actually have friend of the podcast and pro photographer Nick Iwanishin call me out on last episode. Yeah, he said we kind of did Celine a little dirty there. We didn't really talk about how, she beat Lucinda at Worlds and Puck as well. Or not at Worlds, at Nationals a little while ago. So, I mean, all 3 of them came in hot, along with Puck, who had won the previous World Cup. So, I mean, that battle was great until it wasn't. You always hate to see a crash kind of dictate how the racing is going to go, but that definitely seemed to be the case. And conditions even played a bit of a role in a lot of the races too. You saw it in the men's elite race near the end. So yeah, just an unreal weekend, and the fans look to be having a good time. So I mean, that's all you want.
Yeah, I will say on the elite women's race, that was a fantastic race with the 3 Dutch women duking it out. And it's kind of insane that Lucinda Brand had a crash and nearly ruined things for herself. But yeah, Celine Alvarado was super strong. She rode maybe more cleanly than the other 2 on the podium. Former world champion herself. That was a great race to watch as well. Although those 3 performing at such a high level.
Yep. Lucinda's gotten a lot better technically. And I mean, she won her first title during a COVID-stricken year in 2021. So it's fun to see her get a second one after such a dominant season.
James, what was your favorite race?
Of course, the men's elite was awesome to watch. Always love seeing.
Was it?
I don't know. It was, specifically the race for second, yes. I should say. Tibor Del Grosso, I'm a big fan of his vlogs as well. So that was great to watch. But I actually really enjoyed the mixed relay. I really enjoyed that race. I just think it's good to experiment with the formats. It was also nice seeing, again, Tibor Del Grosso get to go across the line with, I think, 3 separate celebrations. He had a bunch of moves.
Yeah, Tibor was spamming the emote button for sure. He is trying to redefine aura in the sport of cyclocross. Even his opening little graphic, he was doing this weird. He was reeling in a fish, and I'm going, who is this kid? He is quite the character. And then of course something else the camera missed on the last lap. Second place, only with a few seconds above Thibaut Nice, who's a pretty good cyclocross racer. Tibor throws an absolutely chaotic whip over that last feature in the course. And I mean, his airtime, can you imagine if that went sour? How we would have reacted to that if he crashed?
Yeah, he would have gotten tutted so much, but it's awesome that he is such a whip monkey. What was the race? It was Degum. He was doing it almost on every lap.
Yeah,
I think. I was going to say though, while he's such a he is all those things you guys said with his reeling in with the fishing rod. He's got all these charming little quirks, but I found during the race he was harder to read. And when he started stretching his back, that was I feel like the first tell I thought we had from him. But the rest of the time, other than, his whips, I'm never sure how to read him, if he's suffering or if he isn't. Meanwhile, I feel with Thibaut Nice, you can sort of tell a little more what's going on with that rider just from his body language.
Yeah. He loves to look around. He was through that start-finish turn. He was locked in to Thibaut, trying to read his facial expression. And I think it sounded like it was quite the headwind on that stretch. So I think he was just looking to have a bit of a respite if he was on the front. But yeah, I mean, when Thibaut, like you said, started stretching his back, I thought he was cooked. I thought it was over. So it was exciting. Now, in an interview I read with Nice, it sounded like his tire choice was a little aggressive in that last lap. It's interesting.
Was it aggressive or was it not aggressive enough?
Well, not aggressive enough. Maybe aggressive in the sense that he was with some faster rolling tires.
I think that's what I heard as well. Yeah, I think that's what he said in the interview.
Yeah, and to be honest, the broadcast didn't really do justice how much rain was coming down, but it sounded like it was getting pretty slick, pretty fast. So that last lap, that section that Van der Poel rode basically every lap, made it look incredibly easy. Even him on his last lap did not ride it, and maybe that was just a choice to let up a little bit. But it was in fact an indication that the course was getting a little trickier. But man, watching them ride some of those sections was just unreal. Like, it looked fake. I'll say it right now. It looked like AI.
AI slop cyclocross?
Right.
The main thing that surprised me is, given the course conditions, no one went in the water. I don't think any riders fell in. Every single time they would do one of those downhill corners, I'd be like, someone's got to go in. But I don't think it happened. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't think so, but I did hear in the broadcast, the announcers say they had ladders on the ready to fish people out if they went into the drink.
That's good.
Yeah, that's the biggest loss of the weekend, is not having anyone actually get into the water. Who cares about 8-time world champion? We want someone in the water.
Oh dear.
Like 8 times? Make it 9, then we'll show up. I don't know.
Wow. Harsh. Oh,
sorry.
Okay,
I'm a wout guy, as we know. Sorry, moving on.
What do you think of, James, what do you think of Matthew Van der Poel's celly on the line?
It was interesting. I was paying homage to Ronaldo with the Sui, as they say. I don't know. It's okay. It's all right. It wasn't my favorite celebration. I think I don't know. I go back and forth on the whole getting off the bike thing, but not much to say.
Jake?
I'm going to bite my tongue a little bit. I have some feelings about Ronaldo just as a person in general, which emulating his celebrations maybe wouldn't be what I would be going for. But I agree. There's something very odd when a rider is off of the handlebars and stands up. It just looks strange. It doesn't look cool. And I think all these guys think it looks cool, but like, no, it's just not it for me. Like, I'm more of like a fist bump, like stay in the saddle. I'm even more of a get off your bike and throw it in the air thing, which I feel like that's been done to death. But like, come on, stay in the saddle, pal.
I don't think you should nick somebody else's celly. I just think... Yeah, now we're talking about Ronaldo when we should be maybe focusing on 8 times that this rider, Matthew Van der Poel, has broken a record. And it's like, and he references a football player, a soccer player.
He also, like, that celebration is done on foot. Like, you just can't, I don't know. Like, when he did it, I was like, oh, cool. But then it wasn't until I saw his Instagram caption that I realized what he was referencing. So, yeah, I don't know. Like... I think the more impressive thing is, the first time he won was 2015. And I mean, that's part of the story there, just his continued dominance. I think he's missed only a couple years off the top step, but yeah, maybe try a different one for number 9 and 10.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm also reminded a bit of Peter Sagan's run of like the Hulk and the Forrest Gump, but those were taking other pop culture things and making them part of his celebration instead of just using someone else's celebration. I don't know.
Should we talk about Burkowski and her complicated relationship with the finish line?
Burkowska,
sorry.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, I'm going to have the checks in my mentions now.
Barbara Burkowska, yes, the junior women's winner. And why don't you tell us a bit about her complicated relationship with the finish line?
So those of us who watched last year's Worlds in France saw a very tough moment when, I mean, this happened several times in the past, but when a rider comes through and is confused on what lap they're on and they celebrate thinking they have won the race when in fact there is one lap to go. Eli Iserbyt did it famously a number of years ago. Actually, sorry, he didn't do it. He won because of his other rider doing it. My mistake at a cyclocross race. So anyway, she did this last year and she lost. She came in second place, and this year in Hulst, she was able to chase down Lise Revol, the French rider who did win last year, I believe, in the same race, and she was able to hold her off. And she got her own real celebration, which I'm sure had been something running through her mind for the last year, the last season of racing. So very nice to see that. Always exciting to see the juniors and the U23s win, who obviously are really fighting for a career as a professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Revol was leading after laps 1 and 2 and 3, and then Bukowska, she was a bit far back. She was as far back as 10th, and then she just reeled it in and led for the final 2 laps. So that was an impressive race, and it sort of is like, okay, we've made amends for last year's snafu, and ta-da, there's a world champion in Bukowska. I do want to note Alexa Haviland, the Canadian rider. She was as far back as 28th early in the first lap. She got hung up on the first flyover shortly after the hole shot, but she clawed back at least 2 positions by the start of the second, and she finished in 9th overall, that's a pretty darn good ride, just looking at the numbers here. Some other Canadians I just want to touch on briefly. Raphael Carrier, her race was also, she did not have the strongest start. She was around 23rd early on, and she fought her way up to 16th. And her fellow rider there, Nico Knoll, actually was in the 11th spot at one point, but her race ended in spot 23. All right, guys, let's wrap it up there, shall we? That's a lot of Worlds talk.
More than expected. More than you told us we were allowed, so that's very exciting.
That's right. Let's switch briefly to road racing. There was the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race on this past weekend. Sarah Van Dam was 6th. That's impressive for a few reasons. This is her 3rd top 10 finish. I feel like she's been so close. Something big is coming, but she didn't have actually the best race.
She did crash in the lead up to the final moments of the race, and she managed to get herself back into the mix. She did have a teammate in that final sprint, but I can imagine all the adrenaline that goes through your body is probably dispelled fairly quickly just catching back up. So I mean, it didn't look like she had much for the sprint, but to still be there, to still be in contention shows some great determination and some mental strength that at the end of a race like that is probably sometimes hard to muster. So it was an exciting finale, although you see her go down and you're kind of head in your hands. It was exciting up until then, but then it's still, she managed to get something out of it, which was awesome.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And like I said, I feel like something big is going to happen soon for Sarah Van Dam. It's coming. But luck hasn't been on her side recently. All right. On to the feature interview. As I mentioned, it is with James Piccoli. Jake, did you read the excerpt that is in the magazine?
I did. I read the excerpt that you can find in the members only section on the website. So if you're not a member, sign up right now. Run to that portion of the website, log in. It's great. I mean, he's a great storyteller. It does allow you to dive behind the curtain of that classic tale of kind of a racer who's been at it, maybe on middling teams, maybe not quite getting the shot that they feel like they deserve, and then finally kind of getting to a stage that feels maybe sometimes too big and performing. So it's an exciting excerpt. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
And I should say that I've read the whole book. It's very well written. James is I've always known him as a good talker. So the fact that he can take that ability and put it on the page, it's not always easy, but if you can do it, it definitely helps you to spin a yarn in print. And yeah, it's a great book. We talk about who that book is for. And I would say if you're not into cycling, if you're not well versed in North American road racing of the past 10 years, this is a really good way to he does a good job of balancing the new reader or the new person coming into cycling with, and for someone who is already well knowledgeable of the sport, it's also a great read. James, what are your thoughts?
I mean, my big thing was when you talked to him, I know we talked about sort of the audience for the book and hoping that some younger riders would read it and be a bit inspired, a bit motivated in their own aspiring pro careers. And it brought me back to, I think when I was 14, I was reading Phil Guyman's books of that same sort of feeling really motivated. I think I actually wrote a book report on his first book for the 9th grade, which was really funny. But yeah, I like that Picoli's kind of pointing out young riders, motivating young riders, because it is an interesting path to the World Tour from any rider from North America, really. So I think just seeing his pathway towards that is a really inspiring story. And I'm glad that he had young riders in mind while writing it.
All right. So without any further ado, here is my interview with James Piccoli. James Piccoli, welcome back to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you so much for having me.
You have a new book out. It's titled Tell Me I Can't. The publisher is Stonehewer Books. I've read an advanced copy, and actually subscribers of Canadian Cycling Magazine, that's either print or digital, can read an excerpt in the latest issue. But congratulations, James.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you were entertained by some of the stories. I know people who follow cycling closely know that, there's a whole wild west out there in terms of the way teams are run. And there's, I hope to tell some interesting stories to people who know the sport. And I hope for it to be interesting to people who don't know it as well. So thank you for reading it.
Hey, I did enjoy it. And yeah, some of that Wild West element was in there with some of the lower level teams you raced with. It was kind of insane. And I don't want to give too much away, but I do want to begin the discussion with asking you how this book came about. Why did you decide to write a book? When did it start?
Good question. I started writing with a pen and paper, old school style, in my apartment in Andorra. I want to say 2023, I probably started. And I don't know, I felt like there was an interesting story only because my kind of path to cycling was non-typical. You hear of, and I think anybody who's in Canada is probably non-typical. The typical, in quotations, path to pro cycling is, you start as a teen in Europe somewhere, in Belgium or in France or in Italy, and you come up through the feeder teams and the development teams, and you go to national team projects, and you race the U23 circuit, and you have some good results, and you get into the feeder teams, and so on and so forth. But I think anyone who comes into the sport from out of Europe has a kind of unique path, mine being unique in its own right. And I think there was an interesting story behind it. It felt like it needed to be told.
Now tell me about the title. How did you come up with that?
So that's the... people who read the book will discover that a lot of times in my career, and a lot of people who achieve their kind of dream, for lack of a less cheesy way of saying it, there are a lot of people and situations along the way that will tell you it can't be done, that'll say it's impossible, and the book is for. I envisioned a junior cyclist reading this who, is passionate about cycling, or a junior athlete, or someone who's young trying to do something that they want to do that people in their life are telling them can't be done. And they're probably telling them for good reason, because there's a small chance. But it was always my point of view, and it's my point of view in the book, that if you listen to those people, then you've guaranteed your outcome, which is that it's not going to work. The only way to see if something is going to work is if you try. That's the person who I want to speak to is the young person or the middle-aged person who wants to take a big chance in their life, that they will be told that they can't do it. And that was useful for me in my career because it provided a sense of motivation. And I hope it's useful for people who read this book.
Mm-hmm. I also detect in it a bit of defiance and determination. And as you write in the book, you are stubborn. And you say that
Yes.
You say that in print. So I feel it also encapsulates all of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you certainly need a little bit of that. Whoever you are in life, if you want to achieve results that are outside of the norm, you need a little bit of defiance and hard-headedness to be able to pursue something long enough for it to work. So I think you're correct in that assumption.
And you mentioned you had this maybe junior rider in mind that you were writing for, but I sense there was also another maybe audience member, another type of reader that you had in your head as you were telling your story. And let me tell you where I'm going with that. Like, there's stuff in here where you explain about, say, another rider's tells on a climb, whether they're covering up their suffering or they have actually got energy. Or you discuss layering for the rain. You discuss even explaining things like the yellow jersey or the biopassport. Why was it important to get these kind of elements into your story?
Well, writing a cycling book is challenging, as I'm sure you know, being in the business of cycling publications, because you have to kind of deal with, because there's such a steep learning curve in cycling, and there's typically, I don't want to call it an elitist, but there's a kind of culture in cycling where, if you know. So there's kind of an old boys club where, you're only let into where there's just a certain prestige that's afforded to you when you know all the terminology and you can speak the language and you have the fancy bike and you have all the equipment and the glasses and so on and so forth. So it's very challenging as someone coming into the world of cycling, wanting to learn about it and wanting to, starting from zero. And as a writer, or as you kind of speak to people, you have to speak to a broad range of people's understanding. So you want to talk to people who don't know anything about the sport and who are just interested and want to read a cool story or getting interested in cycling. And you also have to kind of make it interesting for people who know about cycling, and you want to give a little bit of detail of stuff that happens behind the scenes. So the biopassport is a good example of something that, even if you know cycling, you probably don't know a lot about the program and how, the inner workings of cycling work and how anti-doping testing works and the reality that day to day that athletes live, trying to be compliant. And there's stuff that's, as simple as layering and yellow jersey, where you want to talk to people who may have less experience understanding the sport and who are kind of trying to get into it. So I hoped to appeal to a broad range of audiences and not really continue this. I struggle to call it elitist, but to kind of explain it for people who might not understand and who are lower on the learning curve.
Oh, I definitely sensed that was going on. And I think you did it quite well because, I'm reading this as someone who is in the world of cycling. And let's say in the magazine or even on our website, we're speaking to a more advanced audience. We don't need to say, as you know, the yellow jersey is, but because we assume a certain level of reader. But you're right, for people starting out, and this is often the pleasure of cycling, when you crack the code, especially if you're a North American, because it seems so exotic and European. But also that's part of the problem with cycling because, it's mystifying and makes no sense. And I have some friends I've explained to them, no, he won the stage, but he's not winning the tour. And they're like, well, who can't, what?
But what? He was first across the line, right?
Exactly.
And listen, credit goes to my editors, because even though I started writing with that in mind, people who are in the cycling world are often blind to, like I was even blind to what I was saying and how I was taking certain things for granted. Like I had to explain what a gel was. Like I remember going through that, getting that note from my editor, being like, "What's a gel? Like, what do you mean gel?" And it's so automatic. And so that really made me appreciate somebody who might pick up this book who doesn't know anything about cycling. I hope to speak to them too, and maybe get some people into the sport who otherwise wouldn't have been. Because we do take it for granted how much there is to learn when you're starting out, having been around the sport for so long.
Totally. As I read the start of the book, where you mentioned how in November 2012, when you were, I'm guessing, around 21, you essentially just decided to pursue pro cycling, and I thought, wow, this is of a different time. Do you think it would be possible to do what you did today?
Listen, I do think cycling has continued. So even when let me ask this in a way, even when I started, that was still at the time, like starting at 21 or whatever, starting old, that was still old. That was still impossible. That still couldn't be done. Because cycling was already along this path of starting really young and, getting riders board young, and there was a certain window that you had to perform. And I do think that's gotten even worse now, like worse in the sense of, riders are now signing to World Tour teams even younger, and they're in the program younger, and it's important to train a certain way younger. So that has gotten, if you ask me, can someone start at 21 now and be a pro? I don't know. Probably, like you're probably reducing your chance of success. But the point is that even then, I was told that that's too old. So what that number is today, I couldn't tell you if it's 21 or 19 or 16. But the underlying message is that regardless of what the number is, if you're going to try something, you're going to be told you can't do it for a variety of reasons. You're too old, or it's not going to work. You should try anyway.
Interesting. Definitely. I agree. 21 was even old to start back then, but and I also agree with your analysis with today, where you see the cycling has gotten a little more. What's the word? I don't want to say rigid, but it's definitely developing systems that require people to be in it earlier if they're going to make that path and make that journey into the pro ranks. Many of the stories you told in the book I was familiar with from following your career. I was happy to revisit your win at the Tour de Beauce in 2018, but I have to admit I had forgotten some of your successes. It's with embarrassment that I admit I read the section about your Tour of Utah stage win and said, what? Oh, yeah. And I know some riders remember almost every result and some don't. As you worked on this book, did a result or even a memory surface that surprised you?
That's a very good question. That's a question from someone who either has thought about this or has thought about their own results. It's very good.
Well, I don't have much results to think about, but I have asked riders. Like, there's some riders where I was like, oh, and remember you were top 10 in this race. I was like, oh yeah, I don't care.
So honestly, I was probably closer to that. So it took a lot of work. I had to fact check myself quite a few times. I probably have a pretty bad memory. And so the way it worked for me is I kind of had to say, I vaguely remember this, and then I'd go, so I swear I went to go Google, like, am I remembering this right? Did I really finish X place in this race? And sometimes I was like, oh, it was better or worse than I thought. But I've met some riders who are that good, who say, some of the directors I had who would be able to tell you, oh, this day was raining and 7 degrees and this guy was on this side of the road and he came like, I would never remember those kind of details. And who knows if those stories from those people are true or not. But I did have to do quite a lot of fact checking to make sure I wasn't, that my memory hadn't failed me. And even though it's only been a couple of years.
I love that. You were on Pro Cycling Stats looking up your own results.
Yeah, literally. It was a tab open on my computer for quite a long time as I was getting through the chapter where I was starting to talk about results, making sure that it wasn't lying.
Oh, that's great. I love that. What was it like revisiting some of the frustrations of the past? I'm thinking of your appeals with the National Federation about selection on the national team, whether that's for the Grand Prix races in 2017 or the Tour of Alberta in 2016. What's it like going through past frustrations?
Strangely gratifying.
How so?
I guess I can say that from a position where, I know that things end up working out kind of as I would expect, as I had expected. I, in that period of my life, was pretty convinced that I was willing to put in the work to become a high level athlete. And the dealings I had with people who were my sources of frustration were often people telling me that, I wasn't going to be an athlete of a certain level. So looking back on it is strangely gratifying in a sense that, there's a little bit of I told you so in there for sure. But it does make me, I don't know if sad is the right word too. I can see that there's other athletes who are probably dealing with this same kind of environment today, or in the period that I would have written that book, and in a way, it was sad to me to think that maybe there was some other athlete who had just as much hard work ethic and talent as I did, and just decided to give in to what the National Federation was telling them instead of kind of be defiant. And that was kind of sad, because I do think there's a lot of room for improvement, is a nice way of saying, with some programs. And having tried to fight that fight, it's very difficult for athletes. So I feel for those people who are sharing the same kind of struggles that I did back then. Yeah, I feel for them.
In the book, you also talk about making your own shoes. Which is harder, making shoes or writing a book?
Writing a book takes a lot longer, I can tell you that. Writing a book was much more out of my character. I wrote essays in high school English, and that's it. I don't write blog posts. I don't do any writing. I don't consider myself a writer even now. I was telling a story that, it seemed to flow rather easily, but writing was much more, I had to learn a lot more with writing. I had to push myself much more out of my comfort zone. I'm kind of technical by nature, and I like to make things. So shoes was a complicated project, but it came naturally, where writing, there's a lot more to learn. And for me, there was a lot more pushing outside of my comfort zone to write a story.
Do you still have those shoes?
Oh, I still have probably every one of my prototypes buried somewhere in my parents' house, which there were a lot of, by the way. But I do still have the pair that I raced on the most. I still have them.
And did you ever talk with Adam Hansen about shoemaking? Adam Hansen, the former pro, who, also designed his own footwear.
I did. I had some messages off him. I can't remember. I met him at a race because I think he was still working for...
He was on Lotto.
I think maybe there was a year overlap. So I think he may have retired in 2020. I remember talking to him. I don't remember the circumstances. I'm going to be completely honest. My designs were heavily influenced on his. He was always very good with concealing the way he actually did his manufacturing, but I kind of reverse engineered and figured out what he would have done to make the shoes the way he did. So he knows that that he was a big influence in the way I designed my shoes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Returning to the idea of determination, you were determined to keep wearing your shoes. You write about this, and there was a moment where the head of your team presented you with sponsor correct shoes. And you wrote that you had to play the game. I'm going to read a little bit from your book. And despite being annoyed at how cycling worked, I would be better off playing along than I would be fighting the norm in this particular battle. So you saw that it was prudent to back down. And this book has a lot of tales of you sticking to your guns. But looking back on your career, do you see any times where you maybe now think, I might have been better served if I'd played along in that case?
That's an interesting question. Let me put it to you this way. I'm very proud of having stuck to my guns when I did. Would my career have turned out a different way if I would have acquiesced in certain ways? Maybe. But I'm very grateful and I'm happy for my path. It made this story. It made the defiance in a certain sense, gave me the opportunity to write my own story and have my own path, and that's something I'm very grateful for. Another version of this question is, would you have wanted it to be easier? Would you have wanted to not have to be defiant and for things to just work out and for people to tell you that it was going to work and for you to get into the programs? And would that have been better? And I don't think so. I don't think I would be the person I am today. And I don't think the story would be the same if I didn't have to be defiant. So no, I guess is the answer to your question. I wouldn't change anything.
I'm going to pick up on another passage that struck me. It comes as you are outlining your team's goals for 2019. That team is Elevate KHS Pro Cycling, and you would be the leader during or for the stage races in that year. And you write, I have never been a big extrovert by nature, but I knew I would have to stretch myself off the bike just as much as on it to create a winning team environment. And the reason that struck me is I thought, what? You're such a strong advocate for yourself. You're not shy about asking what you need or what you want. And I will just say parenthetically, yes, I know introvert doesn't mean shy, but what was it about team leadership that required you to stretch your abilities?
I guess another way of putting it would be, I like to lead prior to that moment by example instead of with words. That's kind of a simple way of putting it. But to build in 2019, to build any team, you have to be willing to pick people up when they're down. You have to be willing to offer words of encouragement, to support people, to have people's backs. And that at the time, that's not something that came naturally to me. And part of this underlying theme of the story is really my personal growth throughout this whole endeavor. Starting from a kid at 21 on the subway who was probably antisocial and unwilling to take risks and, worried about the future and questioning everything, so on and so forth, to this rider at 2019 who, has to move out of his comfort zone to lead people and manage a team and relationship and dynamics and learn how to be a leader. And, that was all, like any story of growth, it was all uncomfortable. So it's varying degrees of being uncomfortable throughout the book, which the boiling point of the book being 2019, when I really had to get out of my comfort zone to be a leader and lead people. When I never considered myself, and still don't to this day, to be a natural leader. But, that was a very important time in my life and in my career.
Yeah, you touch on something there that also I find interesting, is that often when cyclists get into the sport, they're thinking watts, they're thinking speed, maybe they're thinking tactics. But I just don't imagine there's a young kid out there thinking, maybe there are, but I wonder what the interpersonal skills I need are to work on a cycling team and to get the best out of others. You know what I mean? That sounds like management 101 almost.
So let me tell you something as someone who's completed the arc. Like I started off exactly as that kid, obsessed with watts and data. And I figured if my watts per kilogram numbers are good enough, the success is inevitable, whatever success is. And having been through the whole process, those soft skills that you mentioned, like leadership, like managing relationships, like, that is more valuable than I ever would have known. And again, I don't want to change, I would never change my path. But if I were to give a piece of advice to any young cyclist, having lived through the career that I lived and seen everything, and is don't discount the soft skills. The watts per kilogram it's very sexy and it's very easy to measure and it's very, very black and white, but like anything else in life, I saw riders who were at the highest level of the sport and who didn't necessarily have the best watts per kilogram numbers, and so you have to ask yourself, why are they there? How did they get here? What was their path? What are they good at that maybe I'm not good at? Or what am I not seeing? So those kind of things matter, even though a numbers obsessed person probably wishes they didn't.
After the 2019 season, you went to Israel Startup Nation, as it was known at the time, a team you rode with for 3 years. You mentioned this briefly, but your story essentially concludes with your time at Elevate KHS Pro Cycling. Why did you end your story where you did?
That's a good question. And I want to give a couple of different answers. First of all, I think the story of 2012 to 2019, so the story of the come up of the challenge of dealing with the lower levels of cycling and the kind of ascent to 2019 is a different story than the one where you already have a rider who's at the World Tour. They're kind of two different story arcs. They're two different audiences who would find them appealing. I said at another point already, I wanted to speak to an audience who maybe didn't know a lot about cycling. When you talk about World Tour cycling, you're talking to a different audience than just speaking about the come up through the sport. So they're kind of two different stories, two different audiences. There's kind of a more broad appeal to the story I told versus, the kind of nuances of the sport at the World Tour level. That's probably the easiest answer. The second answer, which is, like I'm sure being in the publishing business, is, like I said, I started writing this and started thinking about it way before it comes out. So, maybe one day there's going to be a sequel. But again, I think it's a different story, and I think I don't want to say it's not worth telling, but it's maybe less interesting is the way we put. Maybe I'd have to think about how to make it interesting. But there's less mass market appeal to, I'm sure some people who are really into the sport would love to know how the World Tour works. But I want to talk to just broad athletes and kids, who just want to hear a story of perseverance.
I could see that. I could see the elevator pitch for this story being like, I don't mean to oversimplify what your story is, but to your point, you want to get as many eyeballs on this story as possible. So it's like, kid with struggles, can he make it? And it has that, and it's well crafted. And you're right, it's got the arc that works for this story. And yes, sequel, James Piccoli. This time it's personal at the World Tour.
No, I'm sure. Let's put it this way. I'm going to say something nice. I'm sure there would be a lot of people who would be very interested about the inner dynamics of the second part of the story. Let's put it that way.
For sure. What is your relationship with cycling today?
I still ride, not as much as I would like, because I'm a young father and a busy professional. I will always ride. I love the feeling of being on a bike, but it is, in a strange way, it's very freeing to not be for there not to be so much pressure to push myself all the time. That's very nice. I can eat whatever I want. I can stay up late. I can hang out with friends. Like I'm aware there's a lot of stuff I'm able to do now that was never within the realm of possibility when I was an athlete. So that I enjoy. There's definitely a lot of things I miss about cycling. But I'm happy to be outside of the inner workings of the sport. I don't think, there are a lot of riders who stay in the kind of world of the sport, either as directors or as working for teams in different capacities. I'm kind of happy to be doing something different now. I had my time. I'm very grateful for cycling and all it did for me. But I'm happy to be in a new chapter now.
What about golf? You write about how you played golf as a kid, which is also kind of novel. I know there's plenty of kids that play golf, but I'm thinking Canadian kids, they tend to go towards hockey and soccer. But that also struck me as funny because it was around that time when every second headline about cycling was cycling is the new golf.
That was me, yeah. Maybe that's what did it for me. I read the headline. You
lived it then. Well, anyway, are you playing much golf?
No, I'm not. I play, I have a set of golf clubs somewhere, but I probably played once last year. But hey, maybe I'll get back into it. Who knows?
And tell me what you are up to today. What is your current career? I understand it's related with finance, but still connected with sport?
So I work at CIBC in private wealth. What that means is I manage people's money and I advise people from all walks of life. But I hope to build a practice for athletes because I saw what happens when athletes come into a little bit of money and the mistakes that can be made. And that, having lived that experience, is what got me interested in this line of work. My father was in the business for a long time, so I kind of had this education by osmosis of how to save money and invest and how to live below your means and think about investments long term. But I saw the complete opposite of that happen with a lot of cyclists who start to make a little bit of money and make all the classic mistakes in the book. So I hope to be able to impart that wisdom to some young athletes, whether they're hockey players or there's the cycling market is not enormous, but any athlete who finds themselves in this position, I would be more than happy to guide them based on my experience.
Right, because they have a finite career, and they're not necessarily thinking long term. I can imagine some of them do, but yeah, I imagine many of them don't.
No, it's very difficult, and the athletes have their own unique set of struggles that they deal with in their careers and after. And I would imagine that it would be very easy to, I don't want to say the general population, but people who haven't lived the life of an athlete maybe can't appreciate what it's like after, and after you retire and, kind of lose your life's purpose, so to speak. So I can feel that a lot of athletes probably struggle afterwards. And, if I can help be there for them, maybe that's something worth doing.
Well, James, I really appreciate the chat. It's always good to speak with you. And, I'll be honest, I'm not, in a way, I wasn't surprised that you wrote a book, maybe a little bit, but you are a good storyteller. You've told your stories on this podcast before. And so congratulations again on the book.
Thank you so much.
And that's the episode. It is written and edited by me, Matthew Pioro. I had help from Jake Williams. Thank you, Jake.
You're welcome.
And thank you, James Bunga, for coming on the podcast and helping out.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Also, thank you to web editor Matt Hansen. This episode of the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast is produced by Adam Killick. He did the music as well. Special thanks to Ontario Creates for its support. So, Jake, you have a problem with the cyclocross calendar?
Yes. Yeah, this is something I think we really have to rectify. Given Cyclocross World Championships, the nature of the build-up to this epic event, debatably, I will say, in the hierarchy of World Championships by other disciplines, it stands at the top. It's the most important. It's what everyone tunes in for. Why are there races after? Why am I seeing a Super Prestige on the 7th? Why am I seeing an X2O trophy on the 8th and the 14th? Like, what are we doing here? This is like the Pro Bowl in football after the Super Bowl. Like, who's watching? We already know. Like, Matthew's not pulling up to these. Like, are we still? I get it. Like, the Europeans like their standings and their results, but like, can't we just either push Worlds back or bring all these races in? Like, have 2 or 3 Christmas periods? I don't know.
Yeah, but you watch Il Lombardia after Road Worlds, and you watch Mont Saint Anne after Mountain Bike Worlds. So
I mean,
what's the problem?
Some of us do, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I think the candle's been blown out after the big show. Like, I mean, maybe you want to put on the jersey, but yeah, James, what do you think?
As we were discussing earlier, I think for cyclocross specifically, at least in my opinion, I think Worlds is the big thing. Like, I think out of all the disciplines, cyclocross Worlds is the biggest deal. So I think, for stuff happening after, it's kind of like, well, that was the season. I kind of know who's the best. I mean, we've been knowing who's the best, but now it's on paper.
That's it. And maybe I'm showing my North American bias, and there's maybe Europeans in the mentions going, but my hometown race, and insert small Belgian town name here. I don't know. Tell me, Europeans, please.
Well, I'm sure it means something to the riders who want to wrap up these series and possibly take them overall.
Yeah.
I think really it's just an excuse to keep the party going in Belgium until classics arrive.
Good point. Honestly, that's the best take, is just like keep the frites and the beers flowing. That's honestly fair.
Get it all the way to opening weekend.
Yeah.
But this weekend, if you're in Montreal, you can see James Piccoli at Le Club. That's on February the 8th. He will be at the very cycling-friendly coffee joint in Montreal talking about his book. So look out for that.
You think he'll bring his shoes?
His homemade shoes? Part of the show and tell?
He should. I mean, I'd look at them.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Ride safely, and we'll talk to you later.